it disrupts their lives. It people have to scrape their whole savings. You know, people are losing custody of their children. You know, losing housing, losing their spots and rehabilitation centers, and it's just devastating. And you know, part of the complaint is that these judicial officers know that it can have devastating effects on families. And so, like with the example you said, like lowered it a little bit, lowered the bell a little bit, it makes you wonder, like, do you not believe in what you're doing? If you're in a moody mood, get off the bench, you know, and think about this person who's saying, I can't afford it.
Welcome to the Debug the System podcast. Today we talk with Debug San Mateo Participatory Defense Corps, who has been observing arraignment court for the past 3 years and just filed a judicial complaint based on people's rights not being protected under the Humphrey ruling. On March 25th, 2021, the California Supreme Court upheld the Humphrey decision, ruling that people cannot be held pretrial due to their inability to pay. It declared the money bail system as unconstitutional and violated people's rights. Instead, judges must consider someone's ability to pay money bail, as well as other least restrictive means that can ensure that balances public safety and the person coming back to court. In San Mateo County, judges would rarely ask or consider ability to pay on a case.
You are listening to the Debug Podcast.
Hey, you listening to the Debug Podcast?
Hey y'all, you're listening to the Debug Podcast.
So we are here today on the Debug the System podcast, and we're going to talk about San Mateo County, the criminal justice system, money bail, and the court actors that hold up this system, right? So it's going to be a lit podcast we're going to talk about today. But first, let's talk about who's here in the room, who we got here. Our, participatory defense organizers / freedom fighters who are there supporting families who have had loved ones in the system, still have loved ones in the system, trying to free them and stuff, and we're all trying to free them together. So my name is Charisse. I'm your facilitator for today, and I'm part of Debug. And if we could go around, just say your name, how you feeling today, and what brought you into this work, how long you lived in East Palo Alto or Menlo or San Mateo County and stuff, or beautiful county in the Bay. So,
Cool. Hey, Charisse. Sarah Descors, I've been a community organizer with Silicon Valley Debug, focusing and supporting families in San Mateo County for the last 8 years now, maybe. Wow. It's been some time. Right? And we started out at St. Francis of Assisi Church, meeting in the portables and going to arraignment court, supporting families. And what brought me to this work, my sister, just personal family experiences and knowing what the system, does to our people when you're in a moment of crisis, and really fighting it, fighting and disrupting this system. You all, help us out and beat my sister's deportation case, and we're just paying it forward to the families that we meet, week to week, and again, exposing the issues that are happening in arraignment and the judicial system in San Mateo County.
Yes, and I'm Ana Ramirez Zarate. I'm also a participatory defense organizer with San Mateo. I've been supporting the San Mateo Participatory Defense Hub since September of last year, so it's been a little bit, I think, over 10 months. But what brought me to the work actually was my own lived experience, growing up undocumented, being part of a mixed status family, experiencing my dad's deportation in 2015, really propelled me to want to be involved in community organizing to really change the system. And I think that what has kept me is sort of having the political understanding that there's something that we could do in our communities and sort of embracing participatory defense. I was able to also support my sister through the criminal legal system in Orange County in 2020. So it's kind of hard, I would say, to sometimes, how can I say, like, step away, right? Because so many of our people are sort of, how can I say, not dragged, like funneled into the system. And so what has kept me is just that love for the community and wanting to see a change. But super happy to be here today and, be able to share space with everybody here. So I'll pass it over to you, Lulu.
Hi, my name is Lourdes Best. I'm a community participatory defense organizer with San Mateo County. I've been doing that ever since our existence in San Mateo County, 8 years. Happy to be here. What brought me to this work is the case of, like everyone said, personal. Me more so, my brother had a case, and we were able to fight for his freedom. He was looking at life, and he's a free man today. So what really had me happy about or supporting this work is to be able to give to others and give them hope, because just like everybody else that goes to that courthouse, we were in that shoes. We didn't know how to feel in those moments. We didn't know where to turn or what to do and what type of hope to give. And Silicon Valley Debug was there doing this work in Santa Clara County, and God is good. Now we're doing it in San Mateo County and beyond, and helping people, free people. So I'm happy to be here and be in this space.
Hi, I'm Jamila Rosales Webb, and I'm also with San Mateo County Participatory Defense Organizer. What brought me to Debug was my man, and he's my husband now, encouraged me to participate. And I've been locked in ever since. I think like Anna said, what keeps me, and I'm new to this, but I'm true to this, because I'm from East Palo Alto, and I've seen a lot of people suffer from the injustice. And across the country is you hear stories, you see stories, and that really motivates me to continue and grow. And I used to want to be a social worker, so I have it in, my heart is big, and so I just like to. I'm a natural encourager, and that's why I'm here.
Love it.
My name is Zach, and I've been an organizer for about the last 4 years. I joined on the hub during the George Floyd uprisings, which was very interesting, but I actually learned about Debug a year earlier when I came into the office and saw my brother's cousin's social bio video playing on the main screen. And it kind of hammered home that if I wanted to support the communities that I love and be a part of, which has been East Menlo Park and East Palo Alto, that we're going to have to be part of an organization to do that. And that realizing that the work that we do here is kind of protecting the rights, and if there's something wrong in the system, that kind of within organizations, specifically within Debug, we could attack those things. So I think that's in that spirit, that's why we're here today.
Oh, I love it. I think the thing that really just hearing all of your stories, all of our stories and stuff, is that what really unites us is this love for East Palo Alto, love of our community, and Menlo, and Redwood City, and the San Mateo County and stuff. Like, a lot of folks think San Mateo County, it is one of the wealthiest regions of the world, but then there's all these beautiful little pockets that are carved out of that wealth, right? But the wealth is really in the people who are there, the people who care about the community, who are still there, resisting gentrification, resisting criminal justice or the system and all that. And that was the East Palo Alto I knew, or I still know, was born out of that Black and brown imagination and stuff. And that's who's here in this room. That's who's fighting for our folks in arraignment, in deportation, in ICE, custody, all that stuff, and fighting the prison systems. Because that's gonna free our loved ones, right? That's who's gonna. No one's gonna free us but us, right? So that's right. And the podcast, just like so. The thing that we want to talk about today is this judicial complaint that we just filed, right? So, like, judicial complaint, that's big for like San Mateo County. People always think judges are like, just physically, when you think about them, they come in and they sit high up. They come in their robes, like it's like the 1800s and stuff. But this mighty group of folks here and the families that we support and love filed this judicial complaint. So can folks talk about it? What is this complaint about? How did it come about? What are we trying to achieve out of it and all that?
Well, this judicial complaint really started because of organizing that we were doing around Humphrey. Once, Humphrey law passed, and we're trying to see, if judges were abiding by the law. And we held a national day of action with other hubs too, all throughout, California, and went to arraignment court, not knowing, I know we were going in there and writing down observations, what was happening, what were the system court actors doing in court, where they're releasing our folks, or, they were throwing, massive bail amounts at our people and keeping them detained. And so we started, going to arraignment court for like 2-3 years. I can't remember how long, but it's been some time. And, throughout that process, again, part of it was observations, but at the same time, we were also intervening in that process because we knew that, we wanted to free our people, and we didn't want to just, keep them detained because that's what the judges were doing. And so this judicial complaint tackles the issue of, bail, money bail, but it also speaks to the stories of people that we're seeing who judges are issuing outrageous bail amounts and can, reunite with their families, that they're losing their jobs, they're losing their family, and more than anything, they're losing their liberty. And so we are asking for an investigation, what's happening in arraignment court, and looking at these judges who are not abiding by Humphrey. Surprisingly, after years that, Humphrey has been in existence.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Sari talks about, which might be shocking to some people, is that judges aren't following laws. And it's exactly what you would see. So in 2022, we put together a report, just what Sari was talking about, just to see what's happening, what's implementation like. And it wasn't our expectation that 99% of hearings that happened in arraignment, the people's rights were not being protected. There wasn't a question of did they have the ability to pay. And in fact, judges were avoiding the question, and it wasn't being brought up nearly at all in arraignment court, and maybe by one attorney. And just rolling back a little bit on the judicial complaint, we're kind of used to police complaints and maybe complaints against DAs for hiding evidence, but people in court might only kind of see judges as the people who usher them into prison. But they have supposedly this really objective role. And the objective role is that they're the custodian, they're the parent in the room of whatever happened. So if we have an individual who's coming into court and the attorney doesn't argue for them and the judge doesn't protect their right to Humphrey to have affordable bail, that kind of goes all the way up to the top, and it's the judge's issue. So this is kind of the basis of why we're asking for an investigation, which is if it's the defense attorney's not making the arguments, if it's the DA's pushing too hard, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's the judge's one true job is to protect the rights of the accused, and that's not happening in San Mateo County.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lourdes.
Yeah, how can you expect someone that is getting SSI or supplemental security income to pay a $50,000 bill when, if you're on these government programs, you're not even allowed to have $2,000 in your bank account without losing these programs? So how could we expect someone that goes into the courtroom and says, this is what my income is, to come up with these amount of money when in reality they couldn't even receive government aid for having $2,000 in their bank account or in their possession? So it's wrong and it's not right, and something has to be done.
The math ain't mathing. You want to share some? What are some of the things that you see in arraignment court? Like, not everyone is like, oh yeah, let's go to arraignment court. People think trial, people think like, you know, oh, they're going to take a deal. But like arraignment court is actually one of the most important court hearings, right? Or court dates of a person's case. But what are some of the things that y'all have seen in court?
I think that some of the things that come up in terms of what we have seen through our court watching is that not only have we seen the judges not bringing up Humphrey and citing, right, like in their findings, why is it that they're either not setting bail, or why is it that they're setting it at such high amounts? We don't see them cite anything, right? They don't even reference Humphrey at all. Oftentimes what they're referencing is the bail schedule, which we know it's unlawful to do, but yet they're still sort of practicing that as if it was the law, right, that they're supposed to follow. And on the other hand, we also see, as Zach was saying, right, like you have other key actors like the private defenders who are there representing and supposed to be the advocates on behalf of the community member that's incarcerated. They're not advocating either, like for affordable bail, right? And I can speak to at least like for the cases, and others may chime in on other situations, but at least like for folks that are incarcerated that are Spanish speaking and that rely on the use of interpreters, a lot of the times the way that the proceedings have been going, it's like the judge will set bail. The attorney will not even hold up, right, like to wait for the interpretation. They'll just take whatever bail has been set. And then there's a community member that's trying to catch up with the interpreter who finally hears, oh, like they set your bail at X amount, right? And then coming back and saying like, well, I can't afford that, right? But the proceedings are already over because the attorney agreed to that bail. And so there's that side of things too, where individuals that don't necessarily speak the language are having to be left behind and not advocating in a way that feels affirming to them, and that is actually affording them a due process and arraignment court, which is a huge part of being able to come back home into the community. So, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of like the, like, you know, I mean, folks here collectively since 8 years ago, right, have been going to arraignment courts, but in the last 2 or 3 years have been going pretty much almost every week, every day and stuff. Like, what's like a situation that stood out to you that you were like, oh, damn, like they really did that. They really did that.
Well, I can say that, like, and everyone has said, particularly with the PDP attorneys not bringing up Humphrey, but then if it was a PDP attorney that recognized us, then they would. But you didn't bring it up the past 20 cases, you know, and or the day before, and then here we are, and then you want to bring it up, you know, to say that you brought it up. But with that, I believe part of the complaint is that the judicial officers are not doing their duty of making sure that these PDP attorneys are providing diligent advocacy. And so when the PDP doesn't bring it up, they're not doing that. But the judge is also not doing anything. And if the Supreme Court of California made this ruling, why aren't they doing it? Why are we as regular citizens, we're held to the law and to follow these laws, and, you know, but they're not as judicial officers. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And I think what Jamila's talking about is even more shocking when it's not that they have a different, separate way to do it. They each have their own little way to do it that's based on their personality and you know, their mood for some of the commissioners. And that's just totally not fair to people who are coming in, you know, supposed to be innocent, but feel very guilty when they're not able to talk to their attorney. And when it's very clearly an automatic process. There's one judge who will kind of say the bail amounts before there's any argument, or will say, this is the bail amount I'm going to set. And as Anna said, it's in the law that referring to the bail schedule is not okay, because the bail schedule is something that the judges vote on themselves. So they're referring to something that they voted on and said, this is the justification, when there's a law from the Supreme Court, as Jamila says, that tells them what to do and orders them what to do. And I think we're putting this in public just for that reason, and because there needs to be more eyes, because and a lot of people will know this around the state, San Mateo County out of any other county is a closed system, despite being a county of over 500,000 people who are subject both to the services of PDP, whatever they are, and then to these judges who are not eager to put pressure on PDP to increase, their advocacy on rights, things like Humphrey. But what's also most concerning is this is just the first step in the process, and this is easiest for us as community to see, this person is going to be in custody. But there's also questions about how these things move past this point. If someone is starting their case incarcerated, we know that they get worse outcomes. And so this is why it's so important for PDP and for judges to respect rights out front, because it means the difference between a CDCR sentence or someone being home with their kids and not even going back into a cell at any point.
I've also seen too, while being in arraignment court, is that when you do get that one attorney that's fiercely fighting, right, or trying to make arguments around ability to pay, it's still the judges who disregard that, or even the person that's detained behind, that glass that you can barely hear through, see, what they're saying or what they're arguing, or explaining to their defense attorney. Oftentimes, is that person. At least before we kind of got involved, we would overhear the person saying like, oh, I can't afford, or, I'm going to lose my job. Like, my kid is waiting for me at home. And, defense attorneys that were appointed for arraignment court that day would not even take that into consideration. And then, like I said, one or two individuals that go in there making these arguments, it's completely disregarded by the judges. They go back to the bail schedule. And I remember like one family too, who I believe had been to arraignment probably 3 times. And not, consistently like one day after the other. It might have been like a matter of like a month or so. And that it was like a case with 2 individuals who were part of the same case. But all to say is like they kept going to arraignment court 3 times until like the 3rd time there was one person that was charges were dismissed. But you can just imagine, having to go through each court proceeding, not having, affordable bail or any, least restrictive means of release, and having to go through that proceeding. We know what it does to people, when you're in those moments of crisis, you need to get back to your family and, feeling like at some point you may have to end up pleading or, because you just can't stay detained. But, yeah, these are the harsh things that we see in arraignment court. And sometimes when you step back and you tell others about it, it's hard to believe because, we're seeing these things in arraignment court. And like you said, not everyone goes to arraignment court and like, oh, let me see what's going on in San Mateo. Oftentimes they're so removed from what is actually happening. And so, yeah, we're bringing this attention to San Mateo County judges because, as the presiding judge, they should be ensuring that constitutional rights of detained families are protected, but also the representation that's inadequate. And yeah, we're bringing attention to that.
I actually had something, in terms of like the kind of policy and the lack of representation and the lack of judges kind of interfering, like has effects on the most vulnerable. It's not only kind of these worst of the worst that people want to classify. So one of the ranking judges a few years ago was subject to a complaint because she decided to oppose Humphrey and incarcerate a pregnant woman who was at a program that probation had ordered her, and they arrested her at the program that probation had ordered her to go to. And there was a situation where she had her baby and the baby's father didn't know where the baby was. And the judge, who was one of the ranking judges, decided that woman's bail would be $35,000 when, once again, she was incarcerated for an alleged probation violation. And there's just absolutely no mercy from the bench, even when there's a law that ties their hands and tells them that they have to have mercy on someone's economic situation. That's one of them. And then the other one is like, we'll go in to arraignment court. And I remember one time there's probably 13 people kind of in the gallery. 8 of them are black men. And we're in a county where the 1.5% is black in the county of San Mateo, which has been heavily gentrified. So for 8 out of 13 to be black men, I think we're seeing that like the effects hit the most vulnerable people in society. They don't hit the people with the checkbooks who can pay for the attorneys that will, might actually help you. The rest of the people are stuck with whatever, PDP services there are and whatever attorney there is, and then whatever commissioner there is. And like I said, whatever mood that commissioner has. So it's a bunch of these variables, and none of them are fair to the person in custody because they're all dependent on people's personalities and whims and different feelings, not what the law says and what the legislature tells them to do.
Yeah, and then when you think about like all those black men, right? So they all have families who are also black and brown and stuff, and like in San Mateo County that is perceptually, and also just numerically white and stuff, right? And so this is absolutely, like you're right, Zach, like a racial justice issue and stuff that folks of color, like not just, people of color should pay attention to and stuff, because it's our liberties, our freedoms and stuff, our families who are being impacted the most and stuff. Like I'm hearing too, like, there's a lot of just inconsistencies and stuff, moodiness of like how they rule and stuff. And just then it creates like a lack of like standards, right? Of like what people could actually look forward to or what they're supposed to expect, right? Like I remember sitting in arraignment court too, like maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And the guy, I think he was facing it was a misdemeanor because the bail was $1,000. And the judge had already kind of was almost going to move on, and then he like told his public defender, he's like, no, I'm a student at San Jose City, I need to get out tomorrow and stuff because I have finals and stuff. And then the judge lowered it, but it was so arbitrary, she was like, okay, 500. Like, how did you, like, didn't ask him like, how much could you pay, can you even pay this, should we consider OR and stuff like that, just arbitrarily lowered it. And so when you have a justice system that is based on quicksand and stuff, then you don't know what you're gonna, like, am I gonna stay here another day and stuff, and then what's that impact and stuff. And so I know, we've seen some of these families come to our participatory defense meetings and stuff. We've had families who have had to, scrape money just to bail out and stuff. But what are some of those things that you heard from other families of how this bail, unaffordable bail, but also families having to scramble for that bail, how has that affected them and stuff in the families that you've seen? Like, how has it affected their household? What did people lose out of it and stuff?
It disrupts their lives. People have to scrape their whole savings. People are losing custody of their children, losing housing, losing their spots in rehabilitation centers. And it's just devastating. And, part of the complaint is that these judicial officers know that it can have devastating effects on families. And so, like with the example you said, like lowered the bail a little bit, it makes you wonder, like, do you not believe in what you're doing? If you're in a moody mood, get off the bench, and think about this person who's saying, I can't afford it. One of them we seen, she was a repeat offender, and I actually was in jail with her. Like, I remember her, I saw her, and I'm like, oh, look at her. And they wanted like $100 out of her. $100. I can't afford it. I can't. Well, too bad. And $100, like, you can't just let that go. What is $100? So just imagine like being stuck in there because you can't afford $100. That's a lot to people, Right. Not everybody's, got this check like they do. Yeah. So those are some of the things.
I think since we live in one of the most wealthiest counties in the country, a lot of people don't understand when they're sitting in that judicial suit and they're coming from that background. They don't understand the struggles of what the families that are coming before them are facing. We're talking about immigrant population. We're talking about low-income people of color that are barely struggling to survive in the communities that we are living with, facing the issues that we are facing, such as gentrification and the other things that come along with that. So what might seem like $100 to you is a lot to a family that's struggling. What they can do with that $100, the way that we spend that $100 is a lot different. So sometimes people have to understand that they come with a privilege, and you have to put your privilege to the side, and you have to be accountable and understand where people are coming from, so you can help help a system that is fair and equal for everyone.
Yeah, no, I was gonna touch on something that you said earlier too about, and I think Zach was mentioning too, like, just the inconsistency in findings and rulings by the judges on people's cases or releases, and when there is a releases, we did conduct part of this judicial complaint was that we sent the California public record request to get materials and information about the training that judges or commissioners had received in Humphrey. And surprisingly, there was very few to none that had received any training whatsoever. And then I think the only one that had received some training was really outdated. And so, right, it was very outdated. And so to say, like the decisions that are being made on our people in arraignment court are based on no training, no interpretation of, Humphrey. And it also reminded me too, as we were talking about the implications of sitting pre-trial, still, innocent before proven guilty. And I know, Zach, you can probably talk more about this, but like we had deaths in the jail. And you can imagine, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, a month or more, like what that does to people too while they're sitting, in jail, their attorneys maybe not coming to see them, still waiting, for their bails to be reduced. And would appreciate, Zach, if you could share more too about just like kind of the request too that we did with the jail.
Yeah. So there's been over the past year where Sheriff Corpus has been in the office, a lot of press releases about detox programs and different kind of mental health initiatives. But since January 2023, there are 5 people have died in the jail, which puts San Mateo, just from kind of preliminary research, in the top 10 most deadly counties for jail deaths in that period. And that's just with us not looking at it. But I think, we really have been kind of in the courts. Like one of the people who passed away, I was probably the last person, non-law enforcement, to see him alive or not inside. And I still remember the bail amount. It was $25,000. That's $2,500 for someone to post. And that's the difference between, him going to a hospital or him getting, held up for an hour and then at some point getting sent to a hospital and then passing away. So I think it's like those implications. If people can't don't have anyone, an uncle, a cousin, a son who has been incarcerated, there are people who aren't here anymore just based off the judge's decision to say, 1,000 instead of 500 or 25,000 instead of OR. And I think it's when you kind of sit in those pews and see that person for the last time, it's shocking, and it's something that we don't want to happen again.
Yeah. The impacts are definitely, heavy, right? Especially for the families, for us, based on a decision that feels so quick, or for folks. And I remember when Humphrey did first come out and we went to all these counties to look at how judges were doing arraignments, one of the things that really struck me was how bureaucratic and how paperwork, it was a paperwork mill, to just send someone to jail, to prison, to their death, basically, and stuff, and how that affects everyone else. But for folks who are in the court, it was just another day, I remember one of the first times I went with Lourdes, like back in 2018, like there was, like, so San Mateo Court, right? It's like just physically, right? So it's like there's those pews, and then like they're all in the front. Like they don't even turn to look at the whoever's sitting on the pews, right? So like Lourdes would have to like, go up to the bailiff and be like, excuse me, and all that. Like, but they just wouldn't physically turn towards you. And like, and then the thing about like people having their faces pressed up against the window, and like it was like a zoo. It literally was like a zoo. And like seeing Santa Clara, how it's like, open, like the attorney sits next to the person and stuff, right? Or like Orange County, y'all have a cage in Orange County. Like folks who are in arraignment sit in a cage, like a physical cage with like wires, right? Yeah. And I think that's why, like, Orange County and San Mateo County, I think, always have had like a sister brother relationship, like sent the most kids to ICE back in 2008 and stuff, and like really messed up on arraignment and so. But I think that experience is so similar. But like, I think as we kind of wrap up and stuff, right? Like, I think that one of the things that we've seen and we've learned is that Humphrey, you could have this amazing decision like Humphrey that gives people hope and stuff. We've met Mr. Humphrey, and one of the most humble people out there, who was like, I remember he told a story about he was still in jail waiting for his own Humphrey hearing, right? And like there were other people in the jail being like, man, this one decision passed. I think I'm about to get my Humphrey hearing, and he's like, I'm Mr. Humphrey, that's me, and but how humble, soft-spoken, like sweet man and stuff. And you have this amazing decision that's come down because of him, his courage and stuff. And but you still, and it could change the way that, decisions should be made. We think we should and stuff, but it still takes a community of folks to actually pull that lever to make sure that decision comes to life. And that's what y'all are doing and stuff. And this is just the first start and stuff. And maybe as we close out, like, what is it that there's this complaint, but there's also like the larger criminal justice system in San Mateo County, like, what is it that a year from now, what do you see?
I'm just excited to see the outcome. Is this going to really affect who it needs to affect? Are there going to be changes, or are they just going to, brush it under the table? And it makes me feel good to know people like the Civil Rights Corps, that they too are fighting, for our people. It feels good to look and see somebody that doesn't look like you, but cares about you, your people. So I appreciate that. I don't know what the future holds, but I have hope. I have to have hope in the system, because I want my husband to come home. So I'm hoping on that, and it all ties together. So I'm just hopeful.
I think that for me, sort of like a year from now, what I would like to envision is that this complaint creates an avenue for folks across the state of California to come together and kind of identify, right? Like if it's an issue that's happening everywhere else. I think that we kind of have been hearing from the folks that we've been organizing with that it seems to be a systemic issue. And so for me, it's like, how do we collaborate with others so that we can continue to build on the premise of participatory defense, right? Like building a movement of directly impacted folks to address these issues that we know are impacting people on a daily basis. And so for me, it's envisioning that coalition work and collaboration so that we can have a impact, at the statewide level that started locally. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that, and that's what excites me the most.
What I'm looking for from a year from now is that with this judicial complaint that's coming out from San Mateo County, if you're not in San Mateo County, for you to check in your own county and see if people are being treated the way they're supposed to be treated, and seeing if the Humphrey decision is happening in your county as well. So let this be used as a tool for people to use no matter where you are. I know it's in California now, or to even spread that to, if you're out of state, to where you are, so people can have that right. But to make sure this system is working, the system is designed for all of us to be able to have, we talk about we have free rights, equal justice. Well, let's start it where it's supposed to start. Let's not just have this be a piece of paper. And to also get involved in the communities and go into the courtroom and see what's going on. Bring the community into the courtroom, because we have a space, and use your voice to make change within your community and debug the system.
Yes, right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think a year from now, if we can create that dent, in the system here in San Mateo County, because I know it's going to be a long fight. I mean, we're talking about two different systems, right? Representation and the judicial bench, right? So I know it's going to be a long fight, but if we can create that dent, and like Anna said, create those collaborations, and, figure out how can we join forces, because, I'm sure that, San Mateo is just one spot, but there might be others who as well, aren't abiding by Humphrey, and, constitutional due process rights are being violated day to day on our families of color, or poor families. So, yeah, if we can create that dent, I know we can keep pressing and fighting.
Take us home, Zach.
Yeah, I guess we also do a lot of resentencing work. So we'll talk to guys who've been 20 years in the system, and also like 20 years away from a bad arraignment where they never got out. So it's just, I guess it's just interesting to see like what this last 60, 70 years of the PDP and this last 60, 70 years of the San Mateo County judicial system blowing up and becoming like a major, being majorly funded, and the impact that it's had on the last 60 years on these communities. And I think not for the first time, but I'm proud of the fact that we're going at the entire system, which is both the judicial and the services. And I think, from taking the lead of those guys inside who've been down 10, 20, 15, 32 years, that's what needs fixing. It's the bench and it's the services from the PDP. And so this is the first step, and I'm sure we're going to take it a lot further.
Let's go. Thank you, everyone.